Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is, wherever you are. Welcome to today's Grain Market Blast. It is Tuesday, the 13th of May, all day. You join me and the glamorous, the gorgeous, I don't know any other words beginning with G, Angie Setzer, where she's providing a rapid roundup of the latest pricing flows and market moving news in agricultural markets. But before she does, to keep the lawyers off of our backs, let's get the legals out of the way. So, as usual, nothing discussed in this spaces session constitute trading or investment advice or infers any kind of endorsement by myself, Ryan Paisley, or indeed the wonderful, magnificent, glorious. There's another word.
There's another one.
Oh, bugger. Oh, God.
I'm sure we could come up with this. If we just stood here all day, we could come up with lots of words. But now I know for Christmas or your birthday comes before Christmas, not mine.
It does.
But I know yours does. So for your birthday, I'll get you a thesaurus.
Oh, that'll do. Yeah, I'm one of those.
Yeah, that's what we get a thesaurus. But I have to say, like, I've actually go
Isn't
ahead.
that a dinosaur?
A dinosaur? Yes. No, that's a brontosaurus. I don't know. They've changed all the names to the dinosaurs too. So I just don't even, I am so out of it. I can't even anymore. I'm just like, that is not a triceratops. Like, what are we talking about here?
You and Colton are arguing over
Yeah. We're discussing the dinosaur names and all of the fun stuff that we have here to go along. Speaking of Colton, he actually just poked his head in. So I'm like, yeah, go ahead, bud. So I had to mute myself real quick. But anyway, welcome. Tuesday, right? Happy Tuesday. We've got the USDA numbers out of the way. So let's go ahead and get started here before we thesaurus ourselves out of time. And so we'll go over
thesaurus yourself.
Right? You don't want to thesaurus yourself too much. You'll go blind. Anyway, the USDA gave us their first official supply and demand forecast for new crop marketing year yesterday. So that's the biggest thing that we had. We kind of came into this market report very similar to what we saw going into the March 31st report. Like everyone just kind of piled up with their bearish excitement. Like I'm surprised we didn't have trade estimates of carry out for corn at 2.6 billion and beans at 500 million, just simply because we all kind of came into it with this idea that demand's going to stink, right? The trade deal and the trade problems that we have, like yada yada yada. A lot of analysts out there have been kind of negative on demand, and so we came into this report yesterday expecting the USDA to kind of carry that forward. They did not, which honestly I'm not surprised about. Okay. Like, let's think about administration messaging. Let's think about what the Secretary of Agriculture is currently doing. She's like on stop one of a 10 stop, whirlwind global trip to expand U.S. agricultural exports or market share for U.S. agricultural exports. Like the USDA is probably not only looking at the economics, at the logistics, at all of these things, they're also looking at this as probably a likely factor. And they were a bit of aggressive on their new crop demand projections, which resulted in lower than expected ending stocks, right? So we saw corn carry out come in about 50 million bushels lower on the old, about 25 million bushels lower on old crop, 50 million bushels lower than last month's number. So 25 lower than what traders were expecting, a little bit higher than that on what they were anticipating versus a month ago, 50 million bushel increase in corn exports. We also saw new crop come in about 200 million bushels lower than what traders were expecting, which is stout. Carry out at 1.8 billion isn't anything really to write home about. That's kind of a safe sort of figure, but kind of important to think about it being done or projected currently with 181 million bushel to the acre yield on very lofty acres. Like the math ain't mathin'. I'm not that smart of a person, but I will tell you with the cost increases that we're seeing in fertilizer, especially nitrogen and things like that, with us expanding into some of these more fringe areas, like no offense, but it's not Iowa or Illinois, where the expansion is necessarily taking place. One of these things is not necessarily like the other. So it could get real interesting. Of course, if we see a reduction in production, you'll see certain reductions in demand like feed and residual. Residual is very, very closely tied to production figures, and probably likely exports and stuff like that too, if we were to see the reduction or production issue end up with rise in price. The biggest thing that caught me by surprise, or that I saw that is surprising that the world's kind of ignored it, or traders are kind of ignoring it. The world ending stocks, global ending stocks, came in almost a billion bushels, 787 million bushels lower than what traders
With a
were
B, a
expecting.
billion with a B.
B. It's not a little bit of corn, right, that we missed. And so, there's really one of those things that we have really a limited room for any type of weather issue. But one of the things I really want to point out in this is like there's been this argument amongst analysts over the last 5 or 10 years that like global corn demand expansion has stopped for some reason. I don't know where we got this idea. I think maybe all of the talk of the blend wall, you know what I mean, and some of these other things. Like, but if anything, these numbers prove that's not the case. Like cheap corn,
Yeah.
230 metric ton, you know what I mean? Like $4.40 futures. That encourages a continuation of demand growth. You're not only feeding the hell out of your protein units, your livestock, you're also using it for fuel. You're also seeing it, go into other things. Like you can use corn in industrial uses, feed, obviously, your corn syrup and things like that. And so it's just one of those things to pay attention to. So yesterday's number really just kind of showed us that we have no room for error in corn, but
And
especially, go ahead.
sorry, just because obviously that's a big number, right? Nearly a billion.
Yeah, I
So
think it is.
that's the kind of number that, yeah, that's a lot. So you don't want that landing on your foot, basically.
Yes.
Do you think possibly, well, potentially, one of the reasons why it's not being picked up is just because we've got such a dearth of headlines elsewhere, like so many
Yes.
other things are
And it's hard
important.
to figure out. Like there's been this conversation that we've been having here recently, and actually I'm trying to remember who pointed it out here today, and I think it was Grains Gorilla on Twitter, where he said that the market, the new age in the market struggles to recognize demand, and it's hard to see demand growth. You really look at the USDA numbers. A lot of people will look to the USDA as like the beacon of whatever. Like, well, if the USDA doesn't say it, it doesn't exist. Even if the cash market itself is proving that wrong. The biggest problem
Right.
we have, though, is even when the USDA says, oh shit, we're ignoring it. You know what I mean? Because like you read an
Yeah.
article or whatever that is basically like, well, China's expanding their DDG relationship with Brazil. The U.S. hasn't shipped DDGs into Brazil in years or into China in years. Like Brazil's not taking our market share there, whatever. Like we just have this negative sort of feel. On top of that, though, we also have a shit sandwich that is wheat. And the USDA did surprise us with another large production increase. I'm waiting to get news from NAS, though. I asked Lance this morning, and I'm trying to see if he'll reply. He hasn't said anything yet, but of course, that's what I get for emailing someone at like 7:30 in the morning. I could not remember, or I was not certain if yesterday's wheat production number was survey or like a forecast driven. Someone can kind of chime in if they want to at any point and comment on this side. But I do want to point out the one very worrying thing that I have as we move into summer, talking about USDA data and the importance of it or what it is or how it comes out, is that we've seen a very sharp drop, or we saw a bunch of folks at NAS take that early out. And so then it starts to make you question, what is this information that we're getting? And so, kind of tying into feed grains, why didn't corn react as well? Wheat just continues to get the beats. Production came in well above what traders were expecting. Overall ending stocks for new crop came in about 63 million bushels higher. Global ending stocks came in higher. We just really have this big problem with wheat right now that we don't have a clear market. We used to have tenders. Egypt used to come in, publicly buy, Russia would sell it to them, or someone would, you know what I mean? And we'd kind of know what was going on. Right now we don't, and all the information that we seem to be getting is just of, oh, it's a bigger production, or there's less in the way of demand or something like that. And so they're also kind of playing into, why didn't the market recognize this billion bushel miss in new crop ending stocks? Well, in feed grains, wheat is cheap, and so a lot of folks are assuming, well, if you can't get corn, you'll take wheat.
Right. Got
I
you.
argue that that's not necessarily the case. As someone who's handled physical wheat before, like you don't just dump wheat into the feed market unless it's in line with milling quality wheat, or you have to, like the market's inverted going forward and you're going to get your butt kicked, or it's just garbage. It's 6 parts per million VOM or something like that. It's one of those deals where, yeah, certain market setups will encourage an increase in wheat feeding, but I'm not necessarily sure we could say it's as big as what some folks are talking. So that goes into what we're talking about. Demand is hard to quantify,
Yeah.
especially now as the world gets bigger and there's more to kind of tackle. But Anyway, the biggest number of the day was the soybean number, with the USDA kind of coming out and increasing old crop exports. As expected, we had seen a pretty solid pace to old crop soybean exports. That's one of my favorite things to kind of point out right now, especially to anyone that's talking or crowing about the lack of new crop soybean sales that we have on currently, talking about a lack of 25-26 soybean export sales, because last year we were screaming about the slow pace to soybean export sales well into September, and we currently have beat that target. The USDA's bumped export projections up a couple different times this year because we've had a solid market. So we did see 25 million bushel increase in exports that wasn't expected yesterday. Took old crop carryout down to tree 50. Hell no, Loch Ness Monster. Not getting my tree 50. That's my favorite soybean carryout number, by the way. But we saw that, and the new crop came in well below expectations by about 108 million bushel. That's a lot in beans. It's not a small amount. That's a lot. So we kind of missed there. And what's most interesting about soybeans right now is a lot of people are still talking like we're going to lose 1 million to 2 million acres of beans to corn or something like that. We do that, and all of a sudden you go from 292 to 212. And I know demand, and like you cut production, you're obviously going to have a more nuanced demand projection, but we're also expecting a record soybean yield. So you could easily argue that we take a bushel and a half off from that, another, 50 to 65, 75 million bushels or whatever, cut the acres. I mean, there are a lot of things in soybeans that could, explode in your face. And so it'll be interesting to see, especially if we were to see the US and China kind of come together with a trade deal. So that's a lot. That's like 12 minutes of just USDA numbers. I apologize, but it was a shit ton of stuff. Trade update wise here, we're obviously learning more about the initial agreement between the US and China. Secretary of Dissent came out this morning and kind of said, yeah, we've got this framework, but we also incorporated this sort of thing that won't allow for an escalation. Like, how Trump said yesterday, we have a 10% minimum and a 30% max. Well, apparently, I don't know what the mechanism is. I don't know if you'd read into it or not, but he'd kind of mentioned it, I guess, this morning. But we also saw further indications, like China is saying that they'll take Boeing jets. The US is saying
Yeah.
they're going to adjust their tariffs charged on the de minimis shipments. Oh, China's also saying they may allow for an easier access to their rare earth minerals, which is something that
Yeah.
Trump has been
That was
pushing.
something. And if that was something that we did flag yesterday, is
Yes.
kind of that question that I had, that
There
it
was
was
a back
nothing
and
was meant.
forth. Like China was like, no, we didn't. And Trump was like, yes, they did.
Yeah,
And
but this is for those who don't know, that China kind of, again, another, what would have been any other day a major headline, but obviously with so much headlines going on, it kind of got sounded out. It was a case of that China severely restricted the amount of rare earth exports that they're doing, not just to the US, but globally.
yes.
And that hasn't really been undone, even since the weekend. But we are starting to hear rumors that, potentially, US firms will get preferential treatment when they are exporting. So, yeah, one to keep an eye on that front.
Yes, we'll keep an eye on that. And then the other thing that we're watching, or I think that's super important, kind of going into that sentiment slash money flow slash news flow. There's a lot of talk right now of,
All of the above.
yeah, all of the above. You've got a lot of people that are like, oh my God, look at, China is investing in Brazil, because Xi and Lula are meeting today. They've got another 30 agreements that they're signing. They signed like 37 of these things back in November. Brazil doesn't want to be an official member of the Belt and Road Initiative, but they do want to be a fangirl of it or something.
Yeah, they want the
They
benefits,
want all
but
of
they
the
don't want to
benefits and
tag.
none of the negativity that comes with it. And
Yeah,
so, there's a lot of talk. I think there was a Wall Street article, Wall Street Journal article out this morning. I could say that 5 times fast,
easy for you to say.
right? About COFCO's expansion in a couple of Brazil's ports. I turn into a pumpkin at 9:30. You guys, that's it. I got 15 minutes. Once it hits, I'm done. But apparently, a lot of people are like, oh my God, this is a huge deal. Honey, this has been going on for a while. And we can debate until the cows come home what the impact of the first trade war was on this expansion in Brazil and things like that. But let's take a look at like these giant agricultural conglomerates and the margin that they were set to make by expanding in Brazil, whether there was a trade war or not. Did the trade war help facilitate that? Hell yeah, it did. But is it
Yeah.
happening simply because of Trump or because Trump said, no, it's not? And did this investment in the port of Santos start on November 5th or whatever? No, it didn't. So just stop with that, okay? Can we just not like the world is going to expand trade relations, logistic capacity, all of these things in these large companies are going to be doing it. And yes, the trade war impacts the grain flows and the relationships and some of these other things, but it's not the only thing that's driving this
Yeah.
expansion. So there is a little bit from the media right now that's why I'm coming into my Red Foreman era.
I saw that.
Like, I just want to put my foot in everyone's ass at this point. That's where I'm at right now. I just can't help it. So, we'll see. We'll see what happens. The Bissent's supposed to meet with Japan at the G7 summit. He's saying Indonesia and Taiwan are great. The EU, problematic. Do you get a feeling that the administration would love to see the EU break up before the end of
Oh,
it?
massively, massively. I think
Oh
it's
my
no,
god. Like I just feel like they're working on it
no,
right
no,
now. They're
no,
like,
no,
if we pick
massively.
Italy, Hungary, like Romania, like there's a few of them right now that you could really, really pull and like start to
Look,
just pull the string on the
it's
sweater.
not a coincidence that the UK and Switzerland, two like the prominent European but not in the EU members,
Yes.
are kind of being seen first. And and Trump's language when he's talking about the EU, yes, I think he said they were like just nasty. I think actually quote
Yes.
the EU are nastier.
And then Bissent said something today about the bloc. Let me see if I thought I might have written it down, but he mentioned something about them being just
Whilst you quickly look for that, one thing on the trade front that has come
yeah.
whilst we've been on air is that India is sending, the India's trade minister is to lead a delegation to the US for trade talks, and apparently they start on the 16th, which I believe is Friday.
Friday. Who are these people starting on Friday? By Friday at noon, I'm done. I can't help it. I'm lazy.
Noon
I am a pet
breakfast.
cat. Yeah, 32 on Fridays a.m. Eastern time. But anyway, yeah, so we'll see. You know, I couldn't find the quote, so I'm not gonna worry about it. But it was basically alluding to the danger, like the block, like they're
Yeah,
just not working well. Like there's certain members in the cooperative. That was basically what it was. Like there's certain members in the that aren't cooperating or something like that. And so it's interesting to see, especially because you have certain groups like Italy, you know what I mean? Like they have a surplus, right, with the US, or at
yeah,
the very
and
least,
also
they have a decent relationship they don't want to
Maloney, Trump,
sacrifice.
and Musk. Those three are very, very tight. But yeah,
Yes.
and I can speak, firsthand. The reason why Brexit happened is because the UK were like, "Hang on, this just doesn't work anymore." And
Yes.
everyone's out when push comes to shove. Everyone's out for themselves. And
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. When it comes down to it.
that's why it's so hard to do a deal because like you said, one country's got a surplus, one country's got a deficit, one country needs energy, one country wants to sell energy. It's
Yeah.
just so hard to put a deal together.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So it'll be interesting to watch. It'll be interesting to see how the administration kind of works their magic in that regard. Because, like I said, it does feel like they're kind of identifying the threads in the sweater that could be pulled upon to
Yes,
just kind of make
absolutely.
things
Well put.
a little rough. And so then we're, of course, talking about geopolitics, the EU, all of that fun stuff, because on one side, we're fighting with them, and on the other side, there are homies. We have the Russia-Ukraine situation. We'll see what's going to happen. Russia said they'll send a delegation on Thursday. Zelensky's like, that's not good enough. Putin or nobody. But the U.S. will probably be like, no, no, no. Talks are talks. They're sending a delegation too. Kellogg will be there, and Witkoff,
Yeah.
I believe. So Thursday in Turkey, kind of a big deal. The U.S. had pushed, a lot of folks had pushed for this sort of unconditional ceasefire to start on Monday. Russia was like, thanks, but no thanks. And so we'll see, what Thursday brings, because, there's a lot of talk of additional sanctions and things like that. And so, I'll be interested to see, obviously, like it might just be one of those, remember the red lines from the Obama administration that just
Oh
kind
God,
of
yeah,
kept moving.
yeah.
I thought I'd bring back a blast from the past. This
Oh
is our
God,
red line and it'll only
they
slide
turn they turn
300
pink
dimes.
very
Yeah,
quickly.
it's just going to move 5 feet each day. But it might be one of those situations where this is our red line that just kind of keeps
Today.
sliding, or it may truly be a red line. You don't know with Trump. That's the problem.
Exactly that.
And
Exactly
that's what, like that's what the rest of the world leaders are like. Is he bluffing? I don't know if I want to find out. And so, yeah, we'll be watching that closely, seeing what's going on there, watching the trade negotiations, just paying attention to headlines and weather. That's all over the place. The beauty part about that is now we don't know if the GFS is really performing well or not. So that's giving us a nice little blind spot. Yeah, so we are having a ton of fun over here in Eggs. That's it
Awesome.
for the
Well,
day.
Angie, thank you so much as always. You are absolutely goddamn beautiful. Listeners, thank you so much for listening in, especially our regular listeners. I know I always say it, but truly we do appreciate it, especially all the feedback we get, which is always awesome. So yeah, whatever you're doing, if you are in the fields or whatever, please stay safe. If you're trading, etc., keep it tight. Stay safe, and we will see you all tomorrow. Much love.
Have a good one, guys.